people of Malaysia, I am here to tell that Jesus is the only God, not Allah, and I will rescue us soon in this country.
Imagine growing up inside a royal palace in Malaysia, where your father is a sultan and your face is recognized by millions. You are a princess with 3 million Instagram followers. You wear hijab on magazine covers. You speak at international conferences about the beauty of Islam. You are the perfect image of modern Malay Muslim womanhood, and your future is secured by blood and tradition. But everything changed when the man in white walked into my dream and spoke my name. For 37 years, I was the perfect Muslim princess until Jesus appeared in the garden of my family's palace and showed me the scars on his hands. Today, my title has been stripped. My family has disowned me. My country has erased my name. But I am telling a story that the Malaysian government is desperate to suppress. From a palace overlooking the South China Sea to a safe house in London, I lost everything to find the one thing that matters. Jesus Christ is appearing in Malaysia to people right now, to Malay Muslims, in their bedrooms and dormitories and kampung houses. And no Jakim, no Sharia court, and no rehabilitation center can stop what he has started. My name is Tengku Nurul Aisyah. I am telling you my real name because the time for hiding is over. I grew up in a palace that sat on a hill overlooking the South China Sea. The palace was surrounded by manicured gardens filled with frangipani trees and bougainvillea and orchids that bloomed in every color the tropical climate could produce. Peacocks wandered the grounds. Fountains carved from imported Italian marble splashed in courtyards that connected the private wings of the residence. The floors were polished teak. The ceilings were decorated with Islamic geometric patterns inlaid with gold leaf. Servants moved through the corridors, in silence attending to every need before it was even expressed. My bedroom, as a child, was larger than most Malaysian apartments. I had a canopy bed draped in silk, a dressing room filled with clothes that were selected for me by a stylist who visited the palace every month. A private bathroom with a bathtub carved from a single block of white marble. I had everything a girl could want, except the one thing no palace can provide: the freedom to be ordinary. My education was carefully curated to produce a princess who could represent the royal family on the national and international stage with elegance and intelligence. I attended a prestigious all-girls boarding school in Kuala Lumpur in the Bukit Tungku district, where the daughters of politicians and business tycoons and diplomats were groomed for lives of influence. The school was secular in its academic curriculum, but Islamic in its cultural framework. We wore baju kurung to school. We prayed duur together in the surau every afternoon. We studied Islamic civilization alongside mathematics and science and English literature. I excelled in everything. Not because I was naturally gifted in all subjects, but because failure was not an option for a princess. My father expected excellence. My mother expected grace. And I delivered both with a smile that hid the pressure building behind it. When I was 18, my father sent me to London. I enrolled at the London School of Economics to study international relations. It was the first time in my life I had ever been truly away from the palace and the protocols and the constant surveillance of royal life. London was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I walked through streets where nobody knew my name. Nobody bowed. Nobody called me Tengku. Nobody watched my every move and reported back to my parents. I was just another Malaysian student in a city full of students from every country on earth. I discovered coffee shops where I could sit for hours reading without anyone asking if I needed anything. I discovered parks where I could walk alone without a security escort following at a respectful distance. I discovered the intoxicating freedom of anonymity. But I also discovered something else. I discovered that freedom without boundaries made me anxious. I had been raised inside a structure so rigid and so complete that removing it did not liberate me. It destabilized me. I did not know who I was outside the palace walls. I did not know what I believed when there was no one watching to make sure I believed the right things. Islam became my anchor in London. When everything else felt uncertain and unfamiliar, my faith remained constant. I found a mosque in Regent's Park and attended Friday prayers regularly. I fasted during Ramadan, even when my British classmates were going to pubs and restaurants, and could not understand why I would voluntarily starve myself for a month. I wore my hijab every single day. Not because my father was watching, because I wanted to. It was my identity. My statement to the world that I was a Muslim woman, and I was proud of it. I prayed 5 times a day in my dormitory room, spreading my sajada on, the floor facing the Qibla. Arrow on the Compass app on my phone. I read Quran every morning before my lectures. I joined the Islamic Society at the university and helped organize events during Islam Awareness Week. My faith was not performative. It was personal. It was the one thing in my life that I had chosen for myself rather than having it chosen for me. Or so I believed at the time. Looking back now, I realize that even my faith was inherited. I was Muslim because I was born Muslim. I was Muslim because my family was Muslim. I was Muslim because Malaysia was Muslim. I had never questioned it. I had never examined it. I had never held it up to the light and asked myself, is this true? Or is this just familiar? I graduated from LSE with first-class honors and returned to Malaysia as the polished, sophisticated, internationally educated princess that my father had invested in creating. I was 22 years old, and I stepped back into royal life with a new confidence and a new purpose. I wanted to use my platform to advocate for things I cared about: women's education, youth empowerment, mental health awareness, environmental conservation. Issues that were safe enough to discuss publicly without crossing the invisible lines that surrounded the Malaysian monarchy. I built a social media presence that grew rapidly. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. My followers climbed past 1 million within 2 years, then 2 million, then 3. I posted about fashion and travel and philanthropy. I posted about Ramadan and Eid and the beauty of Islamic art and architecture. I was the modern Muslim princess that young Malaysian women aspired to be. Elegant but accessible. Religious but progressive. Royal but relatable. I was the perfect image. And images, as I would later discover, are the most beautiful prisons ever built. By the time I was in my late 30s, I had settled into a rhythm that looked perfect from the outside. I divided my time between the palace and a luxury apartment I owned in the Mont Kiara district of Kuala Lumpur. I traveled internationally for royal engagements and speaking invitations. I was invited to forums in Dubai and Doha and Istanbul, where I spoke about women in Islam and the role of faith in modern governance. I performed Umrah in Makkah twice a year. I donated generously to Islamic charities. I sat on the board of several foundations that built mosques and funded Islamic education programs across Southeast Asia. I was living exactly the life that a Malaysian Muslim princess was supposed to live. And I was doing it well. My father was proud of me. My mother was proud of me. My followers adored me. The religious authorities approved of me. Everyone was pleased with the image I projected, but no one knew that behind the image, behind the hijab, behind the smile, behind the perfectly curated Instagram feed, there was a woman lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom in a palace on a hill, wondering why the god she had devoted her entire life to had never once spoken to her the way a father speaks to his daughter, wondering why prayer felt like talking into a wall, wondering why the most connected woman in Malaysia felt utterly, completely, desperately alone. I did not know it then, but the answer to that loneliness was already on its way, walking toward me through dreams I could not explain, wearing white robes and carrying a love I had never felt from the religion I was born into. The first dream came on a Monday night in January 2024. I remember the day because I had spent the afternoon at an event in Putrajaya, the federal administrative capital, where I had given a speech about the role of Muslim women in digital innovation. I had smiled for cameras. I had shaken hands with ministers and corporate executives. I had been the perfect princess, performing the perfect role. I returned to my apartment in Mont Kiara, exhausted and emotionally drained. I prayed Isha alone in my living room. I recited Surah Al-Mulk, which my mother had taught me to read every night before sleeping because the Prophet Muhammad said it would protect you in the grave. I climbed into bed. I closed my eyes, and I dreamed. I was standing in the garden of my family's palace, the garden I had known since childhood, the frangipani trees with their white and yellow blossoms, the bougainvillea cascading over the stone walls, the fountain carved from Italian marble splashing softly in the center courtyard. Everything was exactly as it was in real life, except the light was different. The light was golden, not sunlight, not lamplight. Something else. Something that seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the air itself was glowing. I stood on the stone path between the orchid beds and I looked around. The garden was empty. No servants, no gardeners, no peacocks. Just silence and golden light and the smell of frangipani so strong it was almost overwhelming. And then I saw him, standing at the far end of the garden near the wall where the bougainvillea grew thickest. A man, dressed in white. Not the white of a baju Melayu or an Aram garment. A white that glowed. A white that moved and shimmered like fabric woven from light itself. He was standing still, his hands at his sides, his face turned toward me. I could not see his features clearly because the light around him was too bright, like trying to look at the sun through a thin cloud. But I could feel his eyes. They were fixed on me, and they held something I had never felt directed at me before. Love. Not the polite, controlled love of a royal family. Not the conditional love that came with expectations and performance. Pure, overwhelming personal love. Love that knew me. Love that saw through every layer of image and protocol and hijab and Instagram filter and reached the woman underneath who lay awake at night wondering if God knew she existed. I woke up gasping. My heart was hammering against my ribs. My pillow was wet with tears. I did not remember crying. I sat up in bed and looked around my bedroom. Everything was normal. The air conditioning hummed. The clock on my nightstand said 3:47 a.m. The city lights of Kuala Lumpur glittered through the gap in my curtains. Nothing was out of place. But something inside me had shifted. Something I could not identify or name. I felt shaken in a way that prayer and Quran recitation and Umrah and charity and all the religious tools I had accumulated over 37 years could not address. I got out of bed and performed wudu. I prayed 2 rakats of tahajjud, the voluntary night prayer. I begged Allah to protect me from whatever I had just experienced. I recited Ayat al-Kursi 3 times. I recited the 3 quls. I blew over my hands and wiped them over my body, the way my mother taught me to do when seeking protection from evil. Then, I went back to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling until the Fajr Adhan echoed from the mosque in the neighboring district. I told myself it was just a dream. Random neurons firing in a tired brain, nothing more. I went about my week normally. I attended a charity luncheon in Bangsar. I filmed a video for my social media about my skincare routine during the dry season. I visited my parents at the palace for the weekend. I prayed. I fasted on Monday and Thursday as sunnah. I was fine. Everything was fine. And then the following Monday night, it happened again. Same garden. Same golden light. Same man in white standing near the bougainvillea wall. But this time he was closer. Not at the far end of the garden, in the middle, standing beside the fountain. And I could see more detail. His robe was not just white, it was layered with light. His hair was dark, his posture was still and calm, and his hands were extended slightly, palms up, as if he was offering me something, or inviting me to come closer. I stood on the path frozen. My dream self wanted to walk toward him. My Islamic training screamed at me to turn away. I woke up before I made a choice. Same gasping, same pounding heart, same wet pillow, same 3:47 a.m. on the clock. This time I was frightened. 2 identical dreams 1 week apart. Same man, same garden, same time. This was not random. This was a pattern. And patterns meant something. I called my ustaza the next morning, a woman named Ustaza Rohani, who had been my personal religious advisor for over a decade. She was a graduate of Al-Azhar University in Cairo and one of the most respected female Islamic scholars in Malaysia. I told her about the dreams without describing them in detail. I said I had been seeing a man in white in my sleep, and I was concerned it might be jinn trying to deceive me. Ustaza Rohani listened carefully and then gave me a prescription that was standard in Islamic dream interpretation. She said I should increase my recitation of Quran before sleeping. She said I should read Surah Al-Baqarah in my bedroom, because the Prophet said shaitan does not enter a house where Surah Al-Baqarah is recited. She said I should make dua asking Allah to protect me from the deception of shaitan and the interference of jinn. She said if the dreams were from Allah, they would bring peace. If they were from shaitan, they would bring confusion and fear. She told me not to worry. She said many people have strange dreams during times of stress, and that my busy schedule was probably affecting my sleep quality. I followed her instructions meticulously. I recited Surah Al-Baqarah in its entirety in my bedroom that evening. All 286 verses. It took me nearly 2 hours. I recited every protection dua I knew. I went to sleep with the Quran playing softly on a speaker beside my bed. And at 3:47 a.m., I woke up again. Same dream. Same garden. Same man. But this time he was even closer, standing right in front of me. Close enough that I could have touched him if I had reached out my hand. And this time, I could see his face. Not clearly. The expression of such patience, such expression of such patience, such tenderness, such absolute unwavering love that when I woke up I did not gasp or scream or reach for my Quran. I just lay there in my bed and wept, silently, for over an hour. Because whatever this was, it was not jinn. Jinn did not make you feel loved. Jinn did not make you feel seen. Jinn did not look at you with the patience of someone who had been waiting for you your entire life. This was something else. Something my Islamic framework had no explanation for. And it was getting closer every week. The dreams continued. Every few nights for the next 2 months. Same man. Same garden. Same golden light. Each time he was closer. Each time the details were sharper. Each time the love was more intense. I stopped telling Ustaza Rohani about them after the 3rd occurrence because her answers were not helping. I stopped reciting the protection duas because they were not stopping the dreams. I stopped trying to fight it because the truth was I did not want it to stop. The presence of the man in white was the most peaceful, most loving, most real thing I had ever experienced in my entire life. More real than the palace. More real than the prayers. More real than the millions of followers who liked my posts and called me an inspiration. In those dreams, standing in the golden garden of my childhood, I felt something I had never felt in 37 years of Islamic devotion. I felt known, not admired from a distance, not evaluated by my performance. Known. Deeply, personally, completely. by someone whose love did not depend on my hijab, or my prayer record, or my royal title, or my Instagram following. By someone who simply looked at me and loved what he saw. And I was terrified of what that meant. After 2 months of dreams, I was desperate for answers that my religious advisor could not provide and my Islamic training could not explain. The man in white was appearing every few nights now, each time closer, each time more vivid, each time radiating a love so overwhelming that I would wake up weeping and spend the rest of the night sitting on the floor of my bedroom, unable to pray, unable to recite Quran, unable to do anything except replay the dream in my mind and wonder who he was. I knew who I suspected he was. The thought had been forming in the back of my mind for weeks, growing louder with each dream. But I could not say it. I could not even think it fully. Because thinking it meant confronting a possibility that would destroy everything I had built my life upon. If the man in white was who I thought he was, then everything I believed about God, about Islam, about the Quran, about Muhammad, about my entire identity as a Malay Muslim princess was wrong. And I was not ready to face that. Not yet. But I was ready to search. Quietly. Secretly. In the darkness of my apartment. At 3 in the morning while the rest of Malaysia slept. I started with my phone. I downloaded a VPN application and connected to a server outside Malaysia. This was important because the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission monitored internet activity, and certain websites related to Christian content were blocked or flagged, especially those targeting Muslim audiences. As a member of the royal family, my internet activity could theoretically be monitored by the palace security team or by JAKIM, the Federal Islamic Development Department that oversaw religious compliance across the country. I could not afford to leave digital footprints. I opened a private browser and typed the words that I had been afraid to type for weeks. Man in white dreams Muslims. The results that appeared on my screen made my blood run cold. Not because they were frightening, because there were so many of them. Thousands of results. Articles, videos, testimonies, research papers, news reports, all describing the same phenomenon. Muslims across the world seeing a man in white in their dreams, a man who radiated light, a man who spoke their name, a man who told them he loved them, and a man who identified himself as Jesus. I clicked on the first video. It was a testimony from an Iranian woman who had been a devout Muslim her entire life. She described a dream where a man in white appeared in her bedroom and spoke her name and told her he was the way, the truth, and the life. She said she woke up weeping and knew immediately that the man was Jesus. She said she had never read the Bible. She had never met a Christian, but she knew. I watched another video. A Saudi man who had been performing Hajj in Makkah, when he dreamed of a man in white standing inside the Grand Mosque, telling him to stop walking in circles and come to him. I watched another. An Egyptian university student. Another. An Iraqi soldier. Another. An Indonesian housewife from Jakarta. The testimonies were endless, and they all described the same experience, the same man, the same light, the same love, the same words, the same transformation. I sat in my bed watching testimony after testimony for 5 hours straight until the Fajr Adhan echoed through my window and the first light of dawn crept across the Kuala Lumpur skyline. Then I found something that stopped my heart. I found testimonies from Malaysians, not foreigners living in Malaysia. Malay Muslims, born and raised in this country, speaking Bahasa Melayu, describing dreams of the man in white in settings I recognized. Kampung houses in Kelantan, university dormitories in Shah Alam, government offices in Putrajaya, fishing villages in Terengganu. The man in white was not just appearing in the Middle East, he was appearing here, in Malaysia, in my country, in the country where Islam was the official religion and apostasy was punishable under Sharia law, and Jakim spent billions of ringgit every year ensuring that the Malay Muslim identity remained intact and unchallenged. Jesus was walking through Malaysian bedrooms and calling Malay Muslims by name. And no one was talking about it publicly because everyone who experienced it was terrified of what would happen if they spoke. I found a website operated by an underground network of Malaysian Christian converts. It was encrypted and required a password to access the main content. I searched deeper and found a contact form that asked only 3 questions. Are you a Malaysian Muslim? Have you had a dream or vision of Jesus? Do you need help? I stared at the form for 20 minutes, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I filled out the form. I used a fake name. I said, yes, I am a Malaysian Muslim. Yes, I have been having dreams of a man in white for 2 months. Yes, I need help. I need answers. I need to know what is happening to me. I submitted the form and closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment waiting for a response that I was not sure would come. It came 3 days later, an encrypted email with a single paragraph. It said, Sister, we have been praying for you. We know what you are experiencing. Because hundreds of Malaysians have experienced the same thing. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you are not being deceived by jinn. The man in your dreams is Isa al-Masih, Jesus the Messiah. He is real and he is calling you. If you want to meet others who have experienced what you are experiencing, we can arrange a safe meeting. Trust us with your real identity, only if and when you are ready. We will protect you. The email was signed simply Keluarga, which means family in Bahasa Melayu. 2 weeks later, I traveled to Kuala Lumpur under the pretense of a shopping trip to Pavilion Mall in Bukit Bintang. My driver dropped me off at the mall entrance, and I told him I would be several hours. I walked through the mall and exited through a side entrance on the ground floor. I took a Grab car to an address in the Bangsar district, a trendy upscale neighborhood south of the city center, known for its cafes and restaurants and expatriate community. The address led me to a condominium tower. I took the elevator to the 14th floor and knocked on the door of Unit 1407. A woman opened the door. She was Malay, late 40s. She wore a simple baju kurung with no hijab. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked at me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she smiled and said, Denku. I did not give you my real name, I said. She said you did not have to. I recognized your writing style from your social media. She must have seen the panic in my eyes because she quickly added, Your secret is safe with us. Come inside. You are among family now. Her name was Khadija. She had been a teacher at a government school in Petaling Jaya before she was dismissed for suspected apostasy after a colleague reported her to Jakim. She had been having dreams of Jesus for 3 years before she finally surrendered her life to him. She had been forced to appear before a Sharia court and was sentenced to 6 months at a Pusat Pemulihan Akidah, an Islamic rehabilitation center in Ulu Yam, where she was subjected to daily Islamic re-education sessions designed to force her back to Islam. She endured it. She pretended to recant. She was released. And she went straight back to the underground church. She now led a small fellowship of Malay Christian converts who met every week in her apartment. There were 11 of them that evening, 6 women and 5 men, all Malay, all former Muslims, all living in secret, all carrying the same story. Dreams of the man in white, the overwhelming love, the voice speaking their name, the transformation that no amount of Islamic re-education could reverse. They shared their testimonies with me one by one, and I sat on Khadija's living room floor, weeping as each person spoke. A young woman named Siti, who was a government clerk in Putrajaya, had been dreaming of Jesus for a year before she found the courage to respond to his call. A man named Hafiz, who worked as an engineer at Petronas Towers, had encountered Jesus during a spiritual crisis after his wife left him. A university student named Amira from University Malaya had seen the man in white standing at the foot of her dormitory bed 3 times before she finally whispered his name and felt the entire room fill with peace. An older man named Razak, who had been a religious teacher at a mosque in Klang, had dreamed of Jesus showing him a Bible open to the book of John, and when he woke up he found a Bible in a drawer in his office that he had confiscated from a foreign worker years earlier and never destroyed. He opened it to the book of John and read the words, "I am," the way the truth and the life, and collapsed on his office floor weeping. Every single testimony confirmed what I had been experiencing. The man in white was Jesus. He was appearing to Malay Muslims across the entire country, and the movement was growing faster than J. Kim or the religious authorities or anyone in power could contain. I sat among these 11 believers in a condominium in Bangsar, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not in a palace, not on a stage, not in front of a camera. Here, among the hidden ones, among the hunted, among the loved. I returned to my apartment in Mont Kiara that evening, carrying the weight of everything I had heard in Khadija's living room. 11 testimonies from 11 Malay Muslims who had encountered the same man in white who had been appearing in my dreams for 2 months. 11 lives transformed by an experience that the Islamic authorities would classify as mental illness or demonic deception. 11 people living in hiding in their own country, worshipping a god they could not name publicly because naming him would mean imprisonment, forced rehabilitation, social destruction, and permanent exile from everything they had ever known. I sat on my bed staring at the wall, and I felt something I had not felt since the dreams began. Clarity, not confusion, not fear, not the anxious uncertainty that had kept me awake for weeks. Clarity. The man in white was Jesus. I knew it now. Not because Khadija told me. Not because the testimonies convinced me intellectually. But because something deep inside me, that I cannot locate with anatomy, had known it from the very first dream. I had just been too afraid to admit it. That night, I did something different. I did not recite Surah Al-Baqarah. I did not perform the protection du'as. I did not play Quran on the speaker beside my bed. I did not try to block the dream or fight it or explain it away. For the first time since the dreams began, I went to sleep wanting him to come. I lay down in my bed in my apartment on the 14th floor of a luxury condominium in Mont Kiara, Kuala Lumpur, and I whispered into the darkness of my bedroom something I had never said before. If you are real, if you are who I think you are, then come. I am not afraid anymore. I want to see you. I want to know who you are. Come to me tonight and show me everything. I closed my eyes. I felt the familiar pull of sleep drawing me down, and the dream came. But this time it was not like the other dreams. This time everything was different. I was standing in the garden of the palace. The same garden from every previous dream. The frangipani trees, the bougainvillea wall, the Italian marble fountain, the golden light filling the air like liquid amber. But this time the garden felt more real than it had ever felt before. More real than the waking world. I could feel the stone path beneath my feet. I could smell the frangipani blossoms so vividly that the scent filled my entire body. I could hear the fountain splashing, and the sound was not just in my ears but in my chest, vibrating through my ribcage like music played through a speaker pressed against my skin. Everything was heightened, every sense amplified beyond what the physical body could normally experience. And then I heard footsteps, not from the far end of the garden, from inside the palace. The sound of feet walking across polished teak floors, coming through the corridors, getting closer, moving through the private wing, past my mother's sitting room, past the family dining hall, past the prayer room, where I had prayed thousands of prayers to a God who never answered. The footsteps were steady and unhurried, the walk of someone who had the right to be there, someone who was not sneaking or intruding, but entering a house that belonged to him. The door that led from the palace to the garden opened, and he walked out, the man in white. But he was not distant anymore. He was not standing at the far end of the garden or beside the fountain or even a few meters away. He walked through the door and came straight toward me, each step deliberate, each step bringing him closer. And with each step, the golden light intensified until the entire garden was blazing with a radiance that made the tropical Malaysian sun look pale by comparison. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched the fabric of his robe, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, like standing beside a bonfire on a cool highland night. And for the first time, I saw his face clearly. Every detail, every feature. Sharp, strong features framed by dark hair that fell to his shoulders, a beard that was neat and trimmed, skin that seemed to glow from within as if light was not reflecting off his surface but emanating from underneath it, and his eyes, dark and deep and burning with something that I can only describe as the concentrated essence of every good thing I had ever experienced in my entire life, compressed into a single gaze directed entirely at me. He spoke. His voice was not loud. It was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that made the ground beneath my feet tremble. He spoke in Bahasa Melayu, my language, the language of my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother, the language of lullabies and bedtime stories and the first words I ever learned. He said Nurul, just my name. But the way he said it broke something open inside my chest that I did not know was sealed. It was not just a name being spoken. It was recognition, acknowledgement, a declaration that he knew me. Not the princess, not the Instagram personality, not the daughter of a sultan. Me. The woman who lay awake at night wondering if God saw her. The woman who smiled for cameras while aching with loneliness. The woman who prayed 5 times a day and never once felt heard. He knew her. He saw her. And he said her name with a tenderness that made every prayer I had ever directed toward Makkah feel like shouting into an empty room. I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a whisper. "Who are you?" He smiled, not a wide grin, a small, gentle smile that held centuries of patience in its curve. He said, "I am Isa. I am the one you have been searching for without knowing you were searching. I am the one your heart cries out to in the silence between your prayers. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I have been walking toward you through this garden for a very long time, Nurul. I have been waiting for you to stop running and let me reach you." The words washed over me like warm rain on dry, cracked earth. Every syllable soaked into a place inside me that had been parched for 37 years of religious performance. I started crying. Not the dignified, controlled tears of a princess at a funeral or a charity event. Ugly, raw, convulsive weeping that bent me forward at the waist and made my body shake. Because I knew he was telling the truth. I knew it the way I knew my own name. The way I knew the sound of my mother's voice. The way I knew the smell of frangipani in the palace garden. This was not a dream. This was not jinn. This was not a hallucination. This was God, standing in front of me, speaking my language, saying my name, and loving me in a way that Islam had promised but never delivered. He reached out his hands toward me, and I saw the scars. On each palm, a circular wound, healed but permanent. The marks of nails driven through flesh. I stared at those scars, and the last wall of my Islamic theology crumbled to dust. The Quran said they did not crucify him, but the scars said they did. The Quran said it was made to appear so, but the man standing in front of me was not an appearance. He was the most real thing I had ever encountered, more real than the palace, more real than the prayers, more real than the gold leaf on the ceiling of the throne room where my father sat as sultan. Jesus was real. The crucifixion was real. The scars were real. And the religion I had built my entire life upon had been lying to me about the most important event in human history. He said, Nurul, I did not come to take something from you. I came to give you something. Something your religion could never give you. He opened his hands wider, and the scars seemed to pulse with light. He said, I died for you. These scars are the price I paid so that you could be free. Free from performing for a God who never responds. Free from earning love that was always meant to be a gift. Free from the cage of religion that keeps you walking in circles while I stand at the center waiting for you to see me. I am not asking you to be a better Muslim. I am asking you to be my daughter. Come to me, and I will give you the rest your soul has been starving for. Then he showed me something that took my breath away. The garden dissolved around us, and I was suddenly looking down at Malaysia from above. The peninsula stretching from Johor in the south to Perlis in the north. The East Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak across the South China Sea. And scattered across the entire country I saw lights. Hundreds of them. Small flickering flames burning in the darkness. In Kuala Lumpur and Penang and Johor Bahru and Kota Bharu and Kuantan and Ipoh and Alor Setar and Kuching and Kota Kinabalu. Everywhere. In cities and kampungs and fishing villages and university campuses and government buildings and military barracks. Lights. Jesus said, these are my people. They are hidden, but they are mine. I am calling them out of darkness one by one. And no Jakim, and no Sharia court, and no rehabilitation center can stop what I am doing in this nation. I have chosen Malaysia, Nurul, and I have chosen you. I gave you your platform. I gave you your influence. I gave you your voice. Not for Instagram. Not for fashion. Not for royal appearances. For this. To be the voice of the hidden ones. To tell Malaysia and the world that I am here. That I am appearing to Malay Muslims in their dreams. That I am calling them by name. And that the movement cannot be stopped because it is not a human movement. It is my movement, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. I fell to my knees in the vision, not because the weight of his presence forced me down, because the weight of his love made standing impossible. I knelt before Jesus, above the map of my country, with the lights of his hidden people burning below me, and I said, I believe you. I believe you are the Son of God. I give you my life. Everything. My crown. My name. My platform. My family. Everything I am is yours. Use me. Send me. I will be the voice of the hidden ones. I will tell them you are here, and I will not be silent. I woke from that dream on the floor beside my bed. I do not know how I got there. The last thing I remembered from the physical world was lying down on my mattress and closing my eyes. But I opened them on the carpet, with my face pressed against the fibers and my body still trembling from the encounter. I did not move for a long time. I lay there staring at the dark space beneath my bed frame, letting the reality of what had just happened sink into every cell of my body. I had met Jesus, not a vision of Jesus, not a dream about Jesus. Jesus himself had walked into my dream through the corridors of my family's palace and spoken my name and shown me the scars on his hands and given me a mandate that would cost me everything I had ever known. I had surrendered my life to him. I had said yes. And I knew with absolute certainty that there was no going back. The princess who had fallen asleep in that bed was dead. The woman who woke up on the floor beside it was someone new. Someone who did not yet know how to walk or talk or live in the world she had been born into. But someone who knew who she was. And that was enough. The weeks that followed were the most difficult of my life. Not because of persecution. Not yet. The persecution would come later. The difficulty was internal. The difficulty was learning to live as a secret follower of Jesus inside a body that was still dressed in hijab, still attending royal functions, still smiling for cameras, still pretending to be the Muslim princess that 3 million followers expected to see. Every prayer I performed in public felt like a betrayal. Every time I stood beside my mother in the surah of the palace and went through the motions of a salat, I felt like a spy in enemy territory. I was not praying to Allah anymore. I was praying to Jesus. But my body was still bowing toward Makkah because stopping would raise immediate suspicion. This double life was exhausting. It was suffocating. It was necessary for survival. But it was killing me slowly. I needed community. I needed guidance. I needed people who understood what I was going through. So I went back to Khadija. I returned to the apartment in Bangsar 3 days after my encounter with Jesus. I told Khadija everything. The escalating dreams over 2 months. The man in white getting closer each time. The night I finally asked him to come. The palace garden. His voice speaking my name. The scars on his hands. The vision of Malaysia covered in lights. The mandate to be the voice of the hidden ones. Khadija listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the coffee table and took my hands in hers. Her eyes were glistening with tears. She said, "Tengku, what you experienced is exactly what so many of us have experienced." He came to me the same way. He came to Hafiz and Siti and Razak and all the others the same way. You are not alone. You are part of something bigger than any of us can fully understand. He is moving across Malaysia. He is calling his people out of Islam one by one. And now he has called you. A princess. Someone with a platform that none of us have. Someone whose voice can reach millions. This is not an accident, Nurul. This is strategy. Divine strategy. He has placed you exactly where you are for exactly this moment. Over the following months, I immersed myself in the underground church. I attended the weekly gatherings at Khadija's apartment. I read the Bible in Bahasa Melayu that she gave me. A book called Al-Kitab that I hid inside a designer handbag in the back of my closet, where my housekeeper would never think to look. I read the Gospels first. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. The words of Jesus leaping off the pages and confirming everything I had experienced in the dream. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Every verse was a direct line from the man I had met in the garden to the woman reading on her bed in Mont Kiara. I wept through most of my reading. The tears were not grief. They were release. 37 years of religious pressure and performance and striving draining out of me like poison being drawn from a wound. Jesus had already done everything. I did not have to earn anything. I just had to receive what he had already given. The simplicity of it was revolutionary. The freedom of it was intoxicating. I began using my wealth and influence to support the underground church in ways that no one outside the community would notice. I set up an anonymous foundation through a shell company registered in Singapore that funneled money to safe houses across Malaysia where Christian converts could hide when they were being hunted by their families or by Jakim. I paid for legal representation for believers who were dragged before Sharia courts and charged with apostasy. I funded the smuggling of Alkitab copies into the country through a network that operated out of Indonesia, where the Bible was legal and could be printed in Bahasa Melayu without restriction. I purchased apartments in different cities under corporate names and made them available to the network as meeting spaces and temporary refugees. I used every resource my royal privilege had given me to build infrastructure for a movement that my royal identity was supposed to be suppressing. The irony was not lost on me. The princess was funding the resistance. The face of Malay Muslim womanhood was secretly building the underground church, and no one suspected a thing. But I also learned the horror of what my country was doing to people like me. Khadija introduced me to believers who had survived the Pusat Pemulihan Akidah, the rehabilitation centers where Muslim apostates were sent to be re-educated and returned to Islam. I heard testimonies that made my stomach turn. Months of isolation in windowless rooms. Daily lectures from ustaz and ustaza, who berated them for their betrayal of Allah and the Ummah. Psychological manipulation designed to break their faith. Threats against their families. Forced participation in Islamic rituals while guards watched to ensure compliance. Some believers told me they had been beaten. Others told me they had been denied food or sleep for days until they agreed to recite the Shahada and sign documents declaring they had returned to Islam. The system was brutal and efficient. Jakim had been perfecting it for decades, and the religious authorities were proud of their success rate. Most converts who went into the rehabilitation centers came out broken. They signed the papers. They went back to being Muslims in public even if they remained followers of Jesus in secret. The cost of open faith was too high. The machinery of persecution was too powerful. So they hid. They pretended. They survived. But they did not surrender their hearts, because Jesus held their hearts. And no rehabilitation center could reach that deep. I also learned about the scale of what was happening. The movement was bigger than I had imagined. Far bigger. Khadija connected me with leaders of underground networks in other states. Penang, Johor, Selangor, Perak, Kelantan, Terengganu, Sabah, Sarawak. In every state, there were Malay Muslim converts meeting in secret. In every state, there were stories of Jesus appearing in dreams and visions. In every state, the pattern was the same. The man in white, the overwhelming love, the voice speaking their name, the transformation that no amount of religious re-education could undo. I learned that researchers estimated there were now tens of thousands of Malay Christian converts scattered across the country. Some estimates went higher. Nobody knew the exact number because everybody was hiding. But the number was growing every single month. Every week, new contacts appeared in the encrypted channels, new testimonies, new dreams, new lives surrendered to Jesus. The authorities were aware that something was happening. Jakim had increased funding for apostasy prevention programs. The religious police were conducting more raids on suspected Christian gatherings. The penalties for proselytizing to Muslims had been increased, but none of it was working, because Jesus was not using human proselytizers. He was appearing directly in bedrooms and dormitories and kampung houses and palaces. He was bypassing every gatekeeper and every checkpoint and every religious authority. And no law on earth could stop a God who walked through walls. The weight of the double life grew heavier with each passing month. I was attending royal functions during the day and underground church gatherings at night. I was posting about Ramadan on Instagram while reading the Gospel of John in my closet. I was standing beside my father in public prayer while talking to Jesus in my heart. The hypocrisy was crushing me. I knew I could not sustain it forever. I knew that eventually I would have to choose the crown or the cross, the palace or the kingdom, my family or my faith. The mandate Jesus had given me in the dream echoed through my mind every single day. Be the voice of the hidden ones. Tell Malaysia and the world that I am here. I will not be silent. The time was coming when I would have to fulfill that mandate. The time was coming when Tengku Nurul Aisyah would have to step out of the shadows and declare to a nation that wanted to imprison her that Jesus Christ was real, and he was appearing to Malay Muslims, and no power on earth could stop his movement. But before I could speak, I needed to escape. Because speaking inside Malaysia would mean immediate arrest and disappearance into a rehabilitation center from which I might never emerge. I needed to get out first, and then I would let my voice be heard. I planned my escape for 6 months. I could not simply disappear. A princess does not vanish from Malaysia without triggering a national crisis. My face was recognized everywhere I went. My movements were tracked by palace security. My passport was held by the royal household, and I needed permission from my father to travel internationally. Every trip I took was logged and monitored and accompanied by staff who reported back to the palace. Escaping Malaysia, as Tengku Nurul Aisyah, would require a level of deception that I had never attempted before in my life. But Jesus had given me a mandate, and I was going to fulfill it no matter what it cost me. So, I became a strategist. I studied my own surveillance systems. I learned the patterns of my security detail. I identified the gaps in the reporting structure. And I built a plan piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle that would either set me free or destroy me completely. The opportunity came in November 2024. I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference in Singapore. This was not unusual. I traveled to Singapore several times a year for various royal engagements, and the city-state was close enough that it did not require extensive security arrangements. The conference was real. The invitation was legitimate. The only thing that was different was what I planned to do after my speech was finished. I requested permission from my father to extend the trip by 3 days for personal shopping and spa treatments. He approved without suspicion. I had made similar requests before. A princess taking a few days for self-care in Singapore was perfectly normal. What was not normal was the second flight I had secretly booked. A flight from Singapore to London departing the evening of the third day. One way, under a different name. Using a second passport that I had obtained through a contact in the underground network who had connections to document specialists in Thailand. The passport was genuine. Malaysian. Issued to a woman named Siti Nur Ain Binti Abdullah. A common name that would not attract attention. The photograph was mine, but the identity was manufactured. It was illegal. It was dangerous. It was the only way out. I delivered my speech at the conference in Singapore on a Tuesday afternoon. I spoke about the importance of education for women in Southeast Asia. I smiled for photographs. I shook hands with delegates and business leaders and diplomats. I was the perfect princess, performing the perfect role one final time. That evening, I returned to my hotel suite at the Marina Bay Sands. I dismissed my assistant and told her I wanted to rest and would see her at breakfast the next morning. As soon as she left, I moved quickly. I changed out of my designer clothes into simple jeans and a plain blouse. I removed my hijab and let my hair fall loose around my shoulders. I put on minimal makeup and a pair of glasses I had purchased specifically for this purpose. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. Not a princess, not a royal, just a woman. An ordinary Malaysian woman who could disappear into a crowd without anyone looking twice. I packed a small bag with essential items, my Bible, a change of clothes, cash in multiple currencies, my real passport hidden in a compartment of the bag that would not be detected by casual inspection, and the second passport, Siti Nur Ain. My escape route. I left the hotel through a service entrance that I had identified during a previous stay. I walked 6 blocks to a different hotel where a taxi was waiting. The driver took me to Changi Airport. I checked in for the London flight using the false passport. I passed through immigration without incident. I boarded the plane. I found my seat by the window. and as the aircraft lifted off the runway and banked over the South China Sea, I looked down at the lights of Singapore disappearing below me, and I wept. Not tears of grief, tears of freedom. 37 years of gilded captivity falling away with every meter of altitude. I landed in London 14 hours later. Cold, gray, raining. The most beautiful weather I had ever seen because it meant I was no longer in Malaysia. I was no longer under the jurisdiction of JKIM or the Sharia courts or the religious police or the palace security apparatus that would certainly be searching for me within hours of my disappearance from Singapore being discovered. I was free. Free to speak. Free to worship. Free to be who Jesus had called me to be. The underground network had arranged everything in advance. A woman named Grace met me at Heathrow Airport. She was British, Chinese heritage, a member of an organization that helped persecuted Christians from Muslim-majority countries resettle in the West. She drove me to a safe house in a suburb of London, whose name I will not disclose, because it is still being used by others who have escaped. I stayed there for 3 weeks, resting, praying, reading my Bible openly for the first time without fear of discovery, attending church services in a building with a cross on the roof, and singing worship songs at full volume without whispering. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it meant to be a Christian in a country where Christianity was legal, and the freedom was overwhelming. During those 3 weeks, I prepared my testimony. I wrote it out by hand first, then I typed it, then I recorded myself. I practicing it in the mirror. I wanted every word to be precise, every sentence to carry weight. I was about to become the most famous apostate in Malaysian history. A princess of a royal household, publicly declaring that she had left Islam and was following Jesus Christ. The impact would be seismic. The consequences would be permanent. My family would disown me. My country would condemn me. My name would become a symbol of betrayal and shame to millions of Malay Muslims who had looked up to me as a role model. I knew all of this. I accepted all of it. Because Jesus had shown me the lights burning across Malaysia, he had told me to be the voice of the hidden ones. And every single one of those hidden believers was risking the same consequences I was risking. The difference was that I had a platform. I had a voice that could reach millions. I had a responsibility that came with the privilege I had been born into. If a princess could not speak, then who could? If a woman who had lost everything already could not risk losing everything, then what hope was there for the teachers and engineers and students and fishermen who were hiding in the shadows with no resources and no protection? I had to speak, not for myself, for them. The recording took place in a studio apartment in central London. A single camera on a tripod, plain white wall behind me, 2 softbox lights on either side, a microphone clipped to my blouse. I sat in a chair facing the lens and I took a deep breath. I was not wearing hijab. For the first time in my adult life, my hair was visible to the world. I was dressed simply. No royal jewelry, no designer labels. Just a woman sitting in a chair about to blow up her entire existence with the truth. I looked into the camera and I began. I said my name is Tengku Nurul Aisyah. I am a princess of one of the royal families of Malaysia. For 37 years, I lived as a devout Muslim. I prayed 5 times a day. I fasted during Ramadan. I performed Umrah in Makkah. I wore my hijab with pride. I was the face of modern Malay Muslim womanhood. I had 3 million followers who saw me as an inspiration. And I am here today to tell you that everything I believed was incomplete. Because 3 months ago, Jesus Christ appeared to me in a dream in the garden of my family's palace. And he changed everything. I told them everything. The first dream. The man in white standing at the far end of the garden. The escalating encounters over 2 months. the Ustaza's failed explanation of jinn, the secret research that revealed thousands of Muslims across the world were having the same experience, the underground church in Bangsar, Khadija and the 11 believers who welcomed me into their family. The night I finally asked Jesus to come, the palace garden blazing with golden light, his voice speaking my name in Bahasa Melayu, the scars on his hands, the vision of Malaysia covered in lights, the mandate to be the voice of the hidden ones. I read the words Jesus spoke to me directly into the camera. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am not asking you to be a better Muslim. I am asking you to be my daughter. Come to me, and I will give you rest. I paused and looked directly into the lens, and I said, Jesus is appearing in Malaysia to people, not to foreigners, to Malay Muslims, to people born into Islam who have never read a Bible and never met a Christian. He is coming to them in their dreams. He is speaking their names. He is showing them his scars, and he is calling them to himself. There are tens of thousands of them hidden across this nation. In Kuala Lumpur and Penang and Johor and Kelantan and Sabah and Sarawak. They are your neighbors and your coworkers and your classmates and your family members. They are afraid to speak because Jakim will send them to rehabilitation centers where they will be broken and brainwashed. But they will not be silenced forever, because Jesus is with them. And no government agency can stop what God has started. I ended with a message to the hidden ones directly. I said to every Malay believer watching this in secret on your phone, hidden under your blanket at night, you are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not deceived by jinn. The man in white is Jesus. He is real. He is the Son of God. And he loves you with a love that no rehabilitation center can erase. I was one of you. I hid like you. I was afraid like you. But I am not hiding anymore. And one day soon, you will not have to hide either, because his kingdom is coming, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. They called me a princess of Malaysia. But I have found a king whose kingdom has no borders and whose throne will never fall. I was born into royalty, but I was reborn into something greater. I am a daughter of the Most High God, and I will not be silent. The video was uploaded to multiple platforms simultaneously: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Telegram channels that fed directly into Malaysia. Within 6 hours, it had been viewed 2 million times. Within 24 hours, it had crossed 15 million. Within a week, it was the most watched video in Malaysian internet history. The Malaysian government moved immediately to block it inside the country. They issued takedown orders to every platform. They threatened legal action against anyone who shared it. They released a statement from the palace through official channels. The statement said that Tengku Nurul Aisyah had experienced a mental breakdown due to stress and was receiving treatment at a psychiatric facility abroad. It said that she had been manipulated by foreign Christian missionaries who had exploited her vulnerable state. It said that her family was heartbroken and prayed for her recovery and return to Islam. It said everything except the truth. My brother appeared on national television and read a prepared statement disowning me. My father issued a royal decree stripping me of my title and removing my name from the line of succession. My mother did not speak publicly, but I learned through the network that she had collapsed when she saw the video and was hospitalized for 3 days. But the video could not be contained. It spread through VPNs and encrypted apps and USB drives passed hand to hand in coffee shops and university campuses across Malaysia. It reached the hidden ones, and the messages came flooding in, thousands of them. From Malay Muslims who said, "I saw him too." From believers hiding in rehabilitation centers who said, "Your voice gave me hope." From teenagers in boarding schools who said, "I thought I was the only one until I watched your video." From a government official in Putrajaya who said, "I have been following Jesus in secret for 3 years, and I cried for 2 hours watching you speak." From a ustaza in Kelantan, who said the man in white appeared to me last month, and I did not know what to do until I heard your testimony. Message after message after message. The hidden ones finding their voice. The scattered lights connecting into a constellation. The movement that no government could stop revealing itself to itself for the first time. Jesus had told me the gates of hell would not prevail. He was right. He is always right. And I will spend the rest of my life telling the world what he showed me in the garden of my father's palace on the night he walked through the door and spoke my name. If this testimony has touched something inside you, write in the comments, "The hidden ones are rising." Let it be a declaration over Malaysia. Let it be a signal to every secret believer, hiding in every state in this nation. You are not alone. Jesus is here. He is appearing in Malaysia to people, and nothing on earth can stop what he has started.